I never expected to see my son on Mother's Day. Brandon hadn't visited in 8 months, and before that, it had been nearly a year. So when I heard his car pull up in my gravel driveway that Sunday afternoon, my heart did a little jump of joy mixed with worry. Joy because my boy was here. Worry because something must be wrong for him to come without calling first. I smoothed down my old blue dress, the one I'd worn to church that morning, and tucked a strand of grey hair behind my ear. The house was cold, despite it being May. I'd kept the heat off to save money, and the chill had settled into the walls like an unwelcome guest that refused to leave. I hoped Brandon wouldn't notice. Through the window, I watched him get out of his sleek black car. He was wearing an expensive suit, the kind that probably cost more than 3 months of my social security checks. He looked thinner than I remembered, his face drawn and tired despite all his wealth. My boy was 42 years old now, a millionaire several times over from his tech company. But standing there in my driveway, squinting at my shabby little house, he looked lost. I opened the door before he could knock. "Brandon! What a wonderful surprise!" He didn't smile. He kissed my cheek quickly, mechanically, and stepped inside. His eyes swept over the living room, the faded floral couch I'd had since his father was alive, the worn carpet with paths walked bare over 20 years, the curtains that had once been cream but had yellowed with age. I saw him notice the chill in the air, saw him register the emptiness of the house. "Hi, Mom," he said, but his voice was distant, distracted. "We need to talk." My stomach tightened. Those 4 words never brought good news. I gestured to the couch, and we sat down together. The old springs creaked under our weight. I folded my hands in my lap and waited, trying to keep the anxiety off my face. Brandon didn't look at me. He stared at the coffee table, an old wooden thing with water rings from years of use. His jaw was clenched tight, and I could see a muscle twitching near his temple. Something was very wrong. "Mom," he started, then stopped. He rubbed his face with both hands, a gesture I remembered from his childhood when he was trying to solve a difficult math problem. "Mom, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." "Of course, honey, what is it?" He finally looked at me, and his eyes were hard, searching. "Are you happy with the $10,000 Maddie sends you every month?" The world seemed to tilt sideways. I stared at my son, my mouth opening but no words coming out. $10,000? Every month? From Maddie? My mind scrambled to make sense of what he'd just said. Maddie was Brandon's wife. She was elegant and sophisticated, always dressed like she'd stepped out of a magazine. She'd been polite enough to me over the years, but distant. We'd never been close. And she certainly had never sent me any money. Not $10,000. Not $1,000. Not a single penny. I'd been living on my Social Security $812 a month. That was it. That was everything I had to pay for my mortgage, my utilities, my food, my medicine. I skipped meals 3 times a week. I wore the same 3 dresses on rotation. I kept the heat off even in winter, piling on blankets instead. The church had been bringing me food for months because Father Dominic noticed I was losing weight. But Brandon thought Maddie had been sending me $10,000 every month. How long? If it was every month, that would be... I couldn't even calculate it. My thoughts were spinning. Brandon misread the confusion on my face. His expression darkened, hardened into something that looked almost like disgust. "I know it might not seem like enough," he said, his voice turning cold. "But Maddie has been faithful about sending it. Every single month. The least you could do is be grateful." Grateful? I wasn't ungrateful, I was utterly confused. But before I could find the words to explain, to ask what he meant, to understand what was happening, Brandon stood up abruptly. He paced to the window, his back to me, his shoulders rigid with tension. "Brandon," I started, but my throat closed up. What could I say? If I told him I'd never received any money, would he think I was lying? Would he think I was greedy, trying to get more? Or would he be angry at Maddie? I didn't want to cause problems in their marriage. But more than that, my mind was screaming a terrible question. If Brandon thought he'd been sending me $10,000 every month through Maddie, and I'd never received it, where had all that money gone? My hands started trembling. I pressed them together harder, trying to stop the shaking. I needed to think. I needed to understand. But Brandon was waiting for an answer, and I didn't know what to say. So I spoke the only truth I knew for certain. The truth that had nothing to do with money I'd never seen. Son, the church is keeping me alive these days. It was true. Father Dominic and the congregation had been my lifeline. They brought me groceries, helped with repairs I couldn't afford, checked on me when I was sick, gave me purpose and community when I had nothing else. They had literally kept me alive. But Brandon spun around, and the look on his face made my blood run cold. It was anger, yes, but also something else, disappointment, maybe even betrayal. The church, he repeated, his voice low and dangerous. You're choosing the church over what Maddie provides for you? Before I could explain, before I could tell him that I had no idea what he was talking about, before I could ask the questions burning in my mind, the front door opened. Maddie walked in. She was breathtaking as always, wearing a burgundy dress that probably cost more than my car, carrying shopping bags from stores I'd only seen in magazines. Her heels clicked on my worn wooden floor, sharp and precise. Her perfume filled the room immediately. Expensive, floral, overwhelming in my small space. She saw us both and froze. Her perfect smile flickered and died. For just a second I saw raw fear flash across her face. Before she controlled it, smoothed it away behind a mask of polished composure. "What are you two talking about?" she asked, her voice too careful, too controlled. Brandon turned to his wife, and I watched something shift in the air between them. "I was just asking Mom about the money you send her every month. You know, the $10,000 you've been so generous about." The silence that followed was deafening. Maddie's eyes darted to me, and in that split second of unguarded panic, I knew the truth. She had never sent me anything. And somehow, she was terrified that I was about to say so. 6 months before that terrible Mother's Day, I woke up on a Tuesday morning, so cold I could see my breath inside my own bedroom. November had arrived with bitter winds, and I'd been keeping the heat off to save money. My social security check was already stretched thin between the mortgage, the electric bill, and my heart medication. There wasn't room for heat, too. I pulled on 2 sweaters and my thickest socks, then shuffled to the kitchen. When I opened the refrigerator, the cold air that hit my face felt no different from the temperature in the rest of the house. Inside sat half a loaf of bread going stale, a stick of butter, and a jar of grape jelly with maybe 2 spoonfuls left. That was everything. My stomach growled, but I'd gotten used to that sound. I made myself weak tea. I'd been reusing the same tea bag for 3 days and ate 1 slice of dry bread. I needed to make the loaf last until Sunday when Father Dominic would visit after services. I tried calling Brandon that morning. I'd been trying to reach him for weeks, but his assistant always answered. "Mr. Thornton is in a meeting," she'd say in her crisp professional voice. "I'll give him your message." But Brandon never called back. A month earlier, I'd managed to get through to Maddie instead. "Oh, Mom," she'd said, her voice bright and cheerful. "Brandon is just swamped with this new product launch. You know how it is, work, work, work. But don't you worry about a thing. We're taking care of everything. You just focus on staying healthy, okay?" Before I could ask what she meant by taking care of everything, she'd said she had another call coming in and hung up. I'd stared at the phone in my hand, more confused than comforted. That Sunday, my daughter Leslie came to visit like she did every week. She arrived around 2 in the afternoon, still wearing her blue nurse scrubs from her overnight shift at the hospital. Her eyes had dark circles under them. She'd been working double shifts to support her 3 kids as a single mother, but she still came every single Sunday, without fail. "Hey, Mama," she said, kissing my cheek. Then she stopped and really looked at me. Her smile faded. Mama, have you lost weight? Oh, maybe a little, I said, trying to sound casual. You know how it is at my age. Metabolism changes. But Leslie wasn't fooled. She walked straight to my kitchen and opened the refrigerator. When she saw how empty it was, she went completely still. Then she opened the cupboards, also nearly bare. Just some old crackers, a can of soup, and half a box of oatmeal. She turned to face me, and her eyes were filling with tears. Mama, why didn't you tell me it was this bad? You have 3 kids to feed, Leslie. You work yourself to the bone already. I'm not going to be another burden. You're not a burden, you're my mother. Her voice cracked. She sank into one of my kitchen chairs and put her face in her hands. This house is freezing. Your fridge is empty. Mama, how long have you been living like this? I couldn't answer. If I spoke, I'd start crying too, and I'd promised myself I wouldn't cry. I was 68 years old. I'd survived losing my husband, raised 2 children, worked 40 years as a school librarian. I could survive this too. Leslie lifted her head and wiped her eyes. Have you asked Brandon for help? Mama, he's a millionaire. He could fix all of this with a fraction of what he makes in a month. I've tried calling, I admitted quietly. He's always too busy. And Maddie said they're taking care of things. Taking care of things? Leslie stood up, angry now. Does this look like someone is being taken care of? Mama, you're starving. Don't say that word, I whispered, but we both knew it was true. Leslie pulled out her wallet and handed me $80, probably everything she had until her next paycheck. I'm going to the grocery store right now, and then I'm going to Brandon's office tomorrow to have a serious talk with him. No, I grabbed her hand. Please, Leslie, don't make trouble. Brandon is busy building his company. I don't want him to think I'm complaining or being needy. He has his own life. His own life? Leslie's voice rose. You're his mother. You gave him everything. And now he's making something of himself. I'm proud of him. I won't guilt him into feeling obligated to help me. Leslie looked like she wanted to argue more, but she saw how upset I was getting. Finally, she squeezed my hand and nodded. Okay, Mama, I won't go to Brandon's office. But you have to promise me something. If things get worse, you'll tell me. Promise? I promise. I lied. After Leslie left with her grocery list, I sat in my cold living room and felt the weight of my loneliness. I had 2 children. One was a millionaire who never visited. One was struggling herself but still showed up every week. And I was caught between pride and desperation, unable to ask for help from the one who could easily give it. That evening, Father Dominic knocked on my door. He was making his rounds through the neighborhood and noticed I'd missed the last 2 Sunday services. Margaret, is everything all right? He asked, concern written across his kind face. I invited him in, and he immediately noticed the cold. Without asking, he went to my thermostat and turned on the heat. Margaret, you can't live like this. It's not safe. I'm managing, Father. No, you're suffering, and there's no virtue in suffering when help is available. He sat down across from me. The church has a discretionary fund for situations exactly like this. Please, let us help you. I started to refuse. My pride wouldn't let me accept charity, but Father Dominic held up his hand. It's not charity, Margaret. It's community. You've been part of this church for 30 years. You volunteered in the children's reading program for decades. You visited sick parishioners. You organized the food drives. You were there for everyone else. Now let us be there for you. My resistance crumbled. I was so tired of being cold and hungry. So tired of being alone. Okay, I whispered. Thank you, Father. That began a routine that would save my life over the next 6 months. Father Dominic started visiting twice a week, bringing groceries and communion. Other church members joined in. Mrs. Chen brought homemade soup. Mr. Patterson fixed my leaking roof for free. Young Bethany mowed my lawn and wouldn't accept payment. But charity came with a price I hadn't anticipated. One Sunday, I overheard two women talking in the church bathroom. I was in a stall and they didn't know I was there. "I just don't understand why her millionaire son doesn't help her," one said. "What kind of man lets his own mother live off church charity?" "I heard his wife comes from old money," the other replied. "You know how those rich women are, they don't want their husband's money going to anyone but themselves. She probably won't let him support his mother." I stayed in that stall until they left, shame burning through me like acid. Leslie didn't keep her promise. 2 days after that Sunday visit, she went to Brandon's office. I found out later that she'd been planning it the whole time, that she'd only agreed not to go because she didn't want to upset me further. My daughter was a fighter, always had been, and she wasn't going to watch her mother starve while her brother lived in luxury. She told me everything that happened. Sitting in my kitchen the following Sunday, while I ate the chicken soup Mrs. Chen had brought. Leslie's hands shook as she recounted the story. She'd marched into Brandon's downtown office building, still wearing her nurse scrubs from her morning shift. The lobby was all gleaming marble and glass, with a massive chandelier that probably cost more than my house. Security tried to stop her at the elevator, but Leslie had inherited her father's stubborn streak. "I'm Brandon Thornton's sister," she'd announced loudly enough for everyone in the lobby to hear. "Either you let me up, or I'll stand right here and tell everyone in this building how my millionaire brother is letting our mother freeze and starve." They let her up. Brandon's assistant, a young woman with perfectly styled hair and a suit that probably cost a month of Leslie's salary, tried the professional brush-off. "Mr. Thornton doesn't take unscheduled appointments. If you'd like to make—" "Tell him Leslie is here," my daughter interrupted. "Tell him if he doesn't see me right now, I'll make sure every employee in this company knows exactly what kind of man he is." 5 minutes later, Leslie was sitting in Brandon's massive corner office. Windows overlooked the entire city. The furniture was modern and expensive. Everything gleamed with success and money. Brandon sat behind his enormous desk, looking irritated but not particularly concerned. "Leslie, what's this about? I'm in the middle of a product launch, and Mama is starving, Brandon." The words exploded out of her. "She's living on $800 a month. The church is feeding her. She's lost 20 pounds. Her house is falling apart. How can you not know this? How can you not care?" Leslie said. Brandon's face went blank with confusion. "What are you talking about?" "Maddie sends her $10,000 every month. Has for the past 2 years. Mum should be perfectly comfortable." Everything stopped. Leslie told me she felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. $10,000? "Brandon, Mum hasn't received a penny from you or Maddie. Not in over 2 years. Not anything," she said. Brandon went pale. Actually pale, all the color drained from his face like someone had pulled a plug. He immediately opened his laptop with shaking hands, pulling up bank statements. His fingers fumbled on the keyboard. "Here," he said, turning the screen toward Leslie. "Look, every single month, $10,000 transfers from our joint account to Mom's account, the account Maddie set up for her 2 years ago." Leslie leaned over and studied the screen. The transfers were real. She could see them, a line item on the first of every month for 24 months, $10,000 each time. That was $240,000 total. But I'd never seen a penny of it. "What's the account number?" Leslie asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Brandon read it off. Leslie pulled out her phone right there and called me. I was folding laundry, the few clothes I owned, when the phone rang. "Mama, what's your bank account number?" Leslie's voice was strange, tight. "Honey, what's wrong? Why do you need—" "Please, Mama, just tell me your account number." I gave it to her, confused and worried. I heard her repeat it to someone else. "Brandon," I realized later. Then silence. "The numbers don't match," Leslie said, and her voice sounded hollow. "Brandon, the money isn't going to Mama's account." Leslie told me Brandon moved faster than she'd ever seen anyone move. He called his bank immediately, demanding to know whose account he'd been transferring money to for 2 years. He put the phone on speaker so Leslie could hear. The bank representative took a few minutes to verify the account details. When she came back on the line, her voice was professional and neutral. "Mr. Thornton, that account belongs to Maddie Thornton. It's registered as her personal account, separate from your joint accounts." Leslie said the silence in that office was deafening. Brandon just stared at the phone like it had spoken in a foreign language. Then his face changed, went from pale to red. From confusion to a rage Leslie said she'd never seen in him before. Maddie had been taking $10,000 from their joint account every month for 2 years. She'd told Brandon it was going to me. She'd set up her own secret account and deposited every penny into it while I went hungry, while I shivered in my cold house, while the church became my only source of food. $240,000 gone, while I'd been rationing tea bags and skipping meals. "Get out," Brandon told Leslie, his voice shaking with barely controlled fury. "Please, Leslie, go home. Don't tell Mum anything yet. I need to handle this carefully. I need to understand what's happening before." He stopped, unable to finish the sentence. Leslie left, but she said she looked back once from the doorway. Brandon was sitting at his desk with his head in his hands, and she thought he might be crying. That night, Brandon made a phone call to a private investigator. Leslie didn't know this at the time, but Brandon told her later. He'd said, "I need you to follow my wife. I need to know everything, where she goes, who she sees, what she's spending money on. Start immediately. Money is no object. I need answers fast." Because the question burning in Brandon's mind, the same question I would ask when I finally learned the truth, was simple and terrible. What had Maddie done with all that money? Where had $240,000 gone, while her mother-in-law starved? For the next week, Leslie visited me every day instead of just Sundays. She brought groceries, paid my heating bill, and told me she'd gotten a small bonus at work. I believed her because I wanted to, because accepting help from my struggling daughter was easier than accepting that something was terribly, terribly wrong in my son's life. But Leslie was preparing me, in her own way. She knew the truth would come out soon. She knew Mother's Day was approaching. And she knew that when Brandon finally confronted Maddie, everything would fall apart. She just didn't know how bad it would be. The silence in my living room felt like it could swallow us whole. Brandon had just asked Maddie about the money, and I'd watched my daughter-in-law's face cycle through emotions so fast I could barely track them. Shock, fear, panic, and then that smooth mask sliding back into place. "What money?" I asked softly, looking between them. My voice sounded small in the tension-filled room. Maddie's perfectly painted lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Brandon, honey, can we talk outside for a moment?" Her voice was controlled, pleasant even, but I could hear the tremor underneath. "No." Brandon's word was sharp as a knife. "We're going to talk right here, right now, in front of my mother." He turned to me, and I saw pain in his eyes that made my heart ache. "Mum, I've been sending Maddie $10,000 every month for the past 2 years. She told me it was for you, that she was making sure you were comfortable, that you had everything you needed. I asked her to handle it because I was too busy with work." His voice cracked on those last words, and I watched my strong, successful son's face crumble with guilt and shame. "I thought you were being taken care of. I thought you had plenty. I thought I was being a good son by providing for you, even if I couldn't visit as often as I should." My hands were trembling so badly I had to grip the armrest of my chair. 2 years, 24 months, $240,000. The numbers spun in my head, making me dizzy. That money could have changed everything. I could have kept my house warm, bought groceries, afforded my medications without choosing which ones to skip. "Brandon," I whispered, "I haven't received anything. Not a single dollar. Not ever." I watched my son turn to his wife. His face had gone hard, like stone. "Tell her," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Tell my mother what you did with her money." Maddie's composure shattered like glass. The elegant, poised woman I'd known for 7 years dissolved into someone I didn't recognize. Tears streamed down her face. ruining her expensive makeup. Black mascara ran in rivers down her cheeks. Her hands shook as she raised them to her face. "I can explain," she sobbed. "It's not what you think. Please, it's not." "Then explain." Brandon's voice cut through her tears like ice. "Explain to my mother why she's been living on church charity, while you've been stealing $240,000 that was meant for her. Explain why she's lost weight from not eating while you've been shopping and wearing $1,000 dresses. Explain it, Maddie." Maddie sank into the nearest chair, her expensive burgundy dress pooling around her like blood. She looked at me, and for the first time since I'd known her, I saw something real beneath all that polished, raw shame, desperate fear, and a pain so deep it was almost physical. "I have a gambling problem," she whispered. The words hung in the air. I felt like I'd been slapped. "It started about 3 years ago," Maddie continued, her voice breaking. "Just online poker at first. For fun, you know? Something to do when Brandon worked late, which was almost every night. I'd have a glass of wine and play a few hands. It was exciting, and I was good at it at first." She wiped at her face with shaking hands, smearing her makeup worse. "But then I started losing, and I kept thinking I could win it back. Just one more hand, one more game. I started betting on sports, going to the casino when I said I was shopping with friends. I took money from our savings account, just a little at first, amounts I thought Brandon wouldn't notice." Brandon's face had gone from angry to horrified. "How much from savings?" "50,000, Maddie whispered. "Over the first year." I watched my son stagger backward like he'd been punched. "50,000? Maddie, I noticed that money missing. You told me it was for renovations on the house." "I know," she sobbed. "I know," I lied. "I've been lying about everything. And when you said you wanted to start sending money to your mother, I saw an opportunity, a way to keep gambling without you tracking the money from our accounts." My stomach turned. I thought I might be sick right there on my worn carpet. This woman had looked at me, her husband's mother, struggling and alone, and seen nothing but an opportunity to feed her addiction. "So you set up a fake account," Brandon said flatly. "Told me it was Mum's. And for 2 years you took every dollar that was supposed to help her and gambled it away." "I kept telling myself I'd pay it back," Maddie cried. "I kept thinking I'd hit a big win. And then I'd send Margaret everything, plus more. I'd make it right. But I kept losing. I lost everything, Brandon. All $240,000 is gone. Every penny." I found my voice then, and it was steadier than I expected. "Maddie, when did you start gambling?" She looked up at me through her tears. "About 3 years ago, like I said." "And when did Brandon start sending the money for me?" 2 years ago." I nodded slowly, letting the timeline settle in my mind. "So you'd already been gambling for a year when Brandon wanted to help me. You already knew you had a problem. You already knew you were losing money you couldn't afford to lose." I paused, making sure she was looking at me. "And when your husband wanted to help his mother, you saw me as nothing but a source of money for your addiction. Not as a person, not as family, just as money." Maddie opened her mouth, but no words came out. She closed it again. Her silence was its own confession. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Brandon's voice was shaking with rage now. "My mother has been going hungry, Maddie. The church has been feeding her because she had nothing. She's been cold. She's been alone. She's been suffering while you—" He stopped, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "While you've been betting away her survival on poker games and sports teams." "I'm sick," Maddie whispered. "I know that's not an excuse, but I'm sick. I have an addiction. I need help. I've wanted to tell you both so many times, but I was so ashamed." "Ashamed?" I repeated the word softly. "You were ashamed. So you let me suffer in silence. You let me believe my son had forgotten about me." Maddie looked up sharply. "He called you?" "I tried," Brandon said quietly. "Multiple times." You always said you'd let Mum know I called, that you'd check on her. I never did, Maddie admitted. Brandon's voice, when he finally spoke again, was so quiet I almost didn't hear it. Pack your things. I want you out of our house tonight. Maddie's head snapped up. Brandon, please! Tonight, he repeated, louder now. We'll figure out divorce papers and legal details later, but I can't even look at you right now. I can't be in the same room with you. Maddie stood on shaking legs. Her expensive heels wobbled on my wooden floor. She looked at Brandon, then at me. Her face a mess of tears and ruined makeup. I know neither of you has any reason to forgive me. I know what I did was unforgivable, but I am sorry. I'm so sorry. And I'm going to get help. Real help this time. She picked up her shopping bags, those ridiculous expensive bags that probably held things she'd bought with money that should have been mine, and walked toward the door. Her hand was on the knob when she turned back one last time. Margaret, she said, looking directly at me. I stole from you. I let you suffer. I put my addiction before your life. Those are facts, and I own them. But I want you to know that I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to become someone who could actually deserve forgiveness, even if I never get it. Then she was gone. The door clicked shut behind her, and I heard her heels on my porch steps, then the sound of a car starting and driving away. The silence she left behind was different from before, heavier, sadder, but somehow cleaner, like a wound that had been lanced and could finally start to heal. Brandon stood frozen in the middle of my living room. Then his legs seemed to give out, and he collapsed onto my old couch. This powerful man, this millionaire, this son I'd raised to be strong and successful, he buried his face in his hands and sobbed. I moved to sit beside him and put my arm around his shoulders. He turned and clung to me like he had when he was a little boy waking from nightmares. His whole body shook with the force of his crying. Mum, I'm so sorry, he choked out between sobs. I should have visited. I should have checked on you myself, instead of just throwing money at the problem and trusting Maddie to handle it. I abandoned you. I'm just as guilty as she is. No, honey, I said softly, rubbing his back the way I had when he was small. You made a mistake. You trusted the wrong person. But Maddie made a choice, many choices, to hurt me deliberately for her own benefit. Those are different things. But I should have known, he insisted, lifting his tear-stained face to look at me. I should have visited. I should have called more. I should have noticed something was wrong. What kind of son sends money and never even checks if his mother is okay? A busy one who made a human mistake, I told him. Brandon, you thought you were taking care of me. You were wrong about how, but your heart was in the right place. Maddie knew I was suffering and chose to let it continue. Can you see the difference? He nodded, but I could tell he didn't forgive himself yet. That would take time. We sat together for a long while, not speaking. The afternoon sun was starting to slant through my windows, making dust motes dance in the golden light. Outside, I could hear birds singing. Inside, my son was slowly pulling himself back together. I'm going to fix this, Brandon said finally, his voice hoarse from crying. Tomorrow, I'm transferring $240,000 directly to your account. That's what was stolen from you. That's what you deserve. And I'm setting up monthly payments too. $10,000 a month like I originally intended. Or more if you need it. I took a deep breath. What I was about to say would surprise him, but it was the truth. Brandon, I don't want $240,000. He stared at me like I'd spoken in a foreign language. Mum, that money was yours. Maddie stole it from you. No, I said gently. That money was yours. You wanted to help me, and I appreciate that more than you know. But these past 2 years, as hard as they've been, taught me something important. I took his hand in both of mine. The church didn't keep me alive because they gave me money or food. They kept me alive because they gave me purpose, community, and love. Father Dominic visits me twice a week. Mrs. Chen brings soup and stays to chat. Mr. Patterson fixed my roof and wouldn't take payment, but I taught his granddaughter to read. Young Bethany mows my lawn, and I help her with her college applications. I squeezed his hand. I've been happier in my poverty with people who care than I ever was when your father was alive and we had money but no real friends. The church didn't save me, we saved each other. That's what community means. Brandon was listening intently now, his tears drying on his face. What I want, I continued, isn't a fortune. What I want is for you to visit me. Actually visit, not just send money and assume that's enough. I want to know my son. I want you in my life, not just in my bank account. I've been so stupid, Mum, he whispered. Building this empire, making all this money, working 80-hour weeks, and I forgot what actually matters. You didn't forget, I corrected him. You just got distracted. But you came here today. You asked the question. Maybe part of you already knew something was wrong. Maybe you were trying to find your way back to what really matters. We talked until the sun went down. Brandon told me about his business, about the stress and loneliness of success, about how he'd buried himself in work after his father died because he didn't know how else to cope with grief. I shared about my life, my faith, my struggles, and the small joys I'd found, even in poverty. For the first time in years, maybe ever, we truly saw each other as more than just mother and son. We saw each other as people.